Landlord tried to exploit me for free labor, by user no panic prepper. I am renting a little house out past the suburbs of the city I am currently working in. It is a little old and the appliances are a bit dated, but it was much cheaper than a 2-bedroom apartment downtown and I move around every couple of years for work. My landlord lives out of state and doesn't have anyone local, so for the past year and a half I haven't talked to anyone. Just pay my rent on time and keep doing my thing. About 4 months ago plumbing issues started popping up and 2 major appliances decided to give up the ghost. I notified my landlord via email and written letter. I rent a lot and have learned to abide by the exact wording in a lease. After several follow-up emails and phone calls, a local handyman showed up to look at everything and provide a quote. After receiving the quote for parts plus labor, the landlord told me flat out that they will not be paying for the repairs. They said that since I am an engineer, they would allow me to purchase parts, install them and then deduct the cost of the repairs from my rent payment. They said it was either this or learn to make do. I was not super thrilled at this response. I replied back to them saying if they were willing to deduct my time and cost of the parts from my rent that I would get started immediately. Thank you very much. They were thrilled to hear it and asked me to send receipts for their records when everything is finished. Great. Now to put together all the pieces and get to work. The first step was to file for an LLC with my current state. Next, I set up some cameras and borrowed a GoPro from one of my hiking mates. I was able to document all the repair process, from me watching YouTube videos of how to do things to me making multiple runs to the parts store to get that piece I didn't know I needed. Here is the kicker. At my day job I make over $50 an hour, that is what my time is valued at. The final bill for everything has worked out to be about 12% higher than the quoted cost and the landlord is very upset, but my lawyer added to the email chain has kept them very civil. Told to change one student's grade, so I changed them all, by user yarn tags. I moved to a new state to take a high school teaching job in a rural town. I liked my fellow teachers and almost all my students, but this was a small town with the usual assortment of outsized attitudes. One student was particularly lazy. Her parents both worked in the small school district, admin at the HS, teacher at the MS. She rarely turned anything in on time, and what was turned in was generally rushed or incomplete as if she'd gotten the instructions second-hand. Somehow, though, she had straight A's in all of her classes. I quickly figured out why. When she turned in another late, incomplete assignment, and I very generously gave it a D, her overall grade in class dropped to a B. I was called in the next day to a meeting with the principal and both of her parents, who immediately complained I was being unfair and capricious with my grades. They accused me of not giving students the instructions, so I showed them the instruction paper which I passed out and went over in class. They accused me of not giving her specifically a copy, but I remember handing it to her and I told them why. She was making out with her boyfriend when I was trying to go over the instructions. They didn't like hearing that part. LOL. They accused me of not being clear with the deadline, but it was the second line of the directions. They accused me of not fairly grading her work, but when I showed them her work, they clearly hadn't seen it before and wondered whether I'd gotten assignments mixed up before I showed them her name on it. The principal asked me to change the grade in the grad ebook. I asked about whether she'd have to redo the assignment first, but that was declined by her parents. I understand why my principal caved. It wasn't worth trying to fight 2 employees in a small, rural district already struggling to recruit people. So I went back to my classroom and changed every student's grade to a 100 in the grad ebook. No special treatment. Even the ones who hadn't turned in a single thing got a perfect score. The fallout. Many students asked me why their grade changed, but I never addressed it. I would just brush them off by saying not to worry about it, though clearly rumors were spreading like wildfire in the small school, because even the secretary and the principal asked me about it later on. I only said that yes, I changed her grade. The principal looked like he wanted to ask me about why I changed all the grades, but he just shrugged and walked away. He never interfered in my grade book after that. The student's parents transferred her out of my class and her boyfriend also transferred a day later. No more PDAs in my class, finally, so no complaints. Edit. I'm trying not to let internet strangers hurt my feelings, but a lot of comments are hung up on the idea of why are you letting them make out in class, you're a bad teacher, lol. To be clear, I tried all the usual stuff before they transferred out. It was an elective class, so it was possible. Asked them nicely to stop, kept them after class and explained why it was inappropriate to make out in class, wrote them up with official reprimands in the school discipline system, made jokes in class to embarrass them into stopping, and eventually sent them to the principal's office, but guess who worked in the principal's office and would run interference? Hoa wants me to build a shorter fence? Got it, by user wabisabi_girl. I'm piggybacking off of the Hoa trend going around here. This story was relayed to me by one of my favorite professors over 5 years ago, so my apologies if the details are foggy or inaccurate. My professor was a very, very private person, the sort of guy who would hesitate to tell you his favorite color if you hadn't known him long enough. He had recently had an incredibly nosy couple move in next door and realized the flimsy 4-foot fence he had got for the dog wouldn't keep out peeping eyes. So he installed a fence. But instead of using a standard size, which he knew his neighbors would peer over, he built an 8-foot fence. It wasn't even a week before Hoa was on his ass, threatening every fine they could and claiming he couldn't have a fence over 6 feet tall. So, being a dutiful citizen, he called the fence company to uninstall said fence. While the fence was being taken down, he closely examined the Hoa handbook on the precise definition of a fence. He installed a new 6-foot fence that fit every single regulation, but with a 3-foot brick wall beneath it. A lot of people are pointing out they've seen a story like this here or on Tumblr. I acknowledge karma farming is a major thing, but I am relaying the story as I heard it. I have plenty more from him, granted they don't fit in this sub. He used them to illustrate points mostly, like one about the horrendous public transport of Galveston where he literally ran through people's yards. I don't know if his stories were true, honestly I bet many of them weren't. But he was a real man. I'd share his name if I felt it was okay. He served Cuban coffee during office hours. We got a random sub toward the end of the semester because he had a triple bypass that he had told none of us about. Truthfully, I don't know if he's alive even, which was one of the reasons I wanted to share this. I have no way to make people believe that I am telling the truth, but if you look through the comments here, several people say they've heard of or even done similar things. Taking the work news to the news, by user patient_house. I'm still unsure if it's really compliance, but my ex-employer announced some news regarding our jobs. It was obviously false, but instead of calling the bullshit, I treated it exactly as I would have if it was true and it bounced back in their face. It was a while ago, when I was working in a community-based organization. We provided end-of-the-line shelter for people and did rights advocacy in a medium town, 100K. The salary was low but okay, but most employees were there because they believed in what we did. The main problem was the manager. She didn't act accordingly to the set of values the organization was based on. She was grossly overpaid compared to employees, took everything personal, made sure we were cut off from the administrators and created an atmosphere where people feared retribution. We were unionized, but after a few months I realized no one was ever filing complaints, even for trivial matters, because they feared she was going to lash back at them. Turns out she had done it to a few people in the past. Once I figured I wasn't going to stay there much longer, I decided to sign all the complaints I could. According to union I could sign anything I witnessed even if I wasn't the target, and figured I would see them to the end and leave. That way administrators couldn't claim not knowing and there was a chance for my colleague to have a better work environment. So, of course, the next few months were a living hell. She picked on me regularly. Still, most people sided with me, at least privately, most of them fearing she would do the same treatment to them if they declared it publicly. One morning, she calls a staff meeting and explains that a large amount of complaints have been filed in the last months, looks at me, and the cost to settle them or to pay the lawyers to fight them might bankrupt the organization and everyone is thus at risk of losing their job soon. Insert ominous music. Panic ensues. My colleagues is crying, they're calling their so, a lot of people are begging me to take them back stating she got the lesson, some of them are genuinely pissed at me. It was obviously bullshit made to turn them against me. I mean, the sole emergency housing of a 100K city, annually filled at 115% capacity, would be closing for a dozen complaints where I'm not even asking for money in any form, over legal fees which are usually budgeted in advance. Come on, it's basic fear brewing schemes. Normally, I would have questioned it during the meeting or tried to reason with them afterwards. But that time, I decided to comply with the narrative and treat it as true. I left for my break and did what I would have done if we were really closing, appealing to the public outrage to help us fulfilling our mission. I called the news. Told them verbatim the morning announcement, the service hole it would create in the community, the job impact it would have in the city, etc. The local news picked it up. They called the manager and administrators about running the story, questioning how come there were enough complaints to threaten a 35-year-old pillar of the community services, asking what the complaints were about etc. Before 4 p.m. that same day, we had another meeting to explain that we must have misunderstood the first meeting, as the organization was in no way shape or form in danger of closing. Sure, we must have misunderstood. Morale of the story, let those who brewed the piss drink it. Boss lost her bonus, by user 1307. The incident happened about 2 months ago, but I just learned of the fallout. A little backstory, I'm a home hemodialysis nurse. I train patients and arrange for all their supplies. Beginning of June I was told to admit a patient ASAP who was moving from out of state, already trained, only needed a home visit, machine, water and drain installation and supplies delivered. Plumber was on vacation equals no water installation possible for 2 weeks. Water is essential for preparing dialysate that in the end cleans the blood. There is an emergency workaround by buying pre-made dialysate, no water required. Patient needed 8 x 5 liter bags each treatment. They come 2 to a box. Patient dialysis 5 days a week, that's 4 boxes each treatment x 5 equals 20 boxes per week. Boss says order them as quickly as possible for 2 weeks. That's 40 boxes of 10 kilograms, 22 pounds. I tell her the shipping cost will be outrageous, let's order 8 boxes express and the rest regular. Nope, she knows better. Okay, I order 40 boxes overnight by air. $1,500 just for shipping. Supplier thinks that's crazy, I thinks that's crazy, boss says do it. End of July they're checking the budget and lo and behold we spent way too much. Less than a third left for the rest of the year. Boss's bonus depends on smart budgeting. She didn't get her bonus this quarter. She was pissed. I feel so vindicated. Sorry about the long story. TLDR, boss tells me to order expensive heavy supplies overnight, blows budget, bye bye boss's bonus. Edit, thank you so much for all the upvotes. I honestly did not expect that.